The wait is finally over, Yellowstone fans, because the first glimpses of 1944 are here, and they are even more haunting and cinematic than we ever imagined. While the world is tearing itself apart on the battlefields of Europe, a different kind of war is brewing on the frozen soil of Montana, and the Dutton legacy is hanging by a single, fraying thread. We've been mourning the losses of 1923 for far too long, but this first look confirms that the tragedy was only the beginning of a much larger, much more dangerous story. Get ready, because the Taylor Sheridan universe is about to get darker, grittier, and more intense than anything we've seen before. The trailer opens not with a bang, but with the heavy, rhythmic breathing of a man who has carried the weight of the world on his shoulders for far too long. We see a wide, sweeping shot of the Yellowstone ranch, but it's not the lush paradise we remember. It's covered in a harsh, unforgiving frost, symbolizing the cold reality the family now faces. Then, the camera pans to a man standing on the porch. It's Spencer Dutton, aged and weathered, with graying hair and deep lines of sorrow etched into his face. The makeup work on Brandon Sklenar is absolutely breathtaking, making him look exactly like a man who has survived the African wilderness and the loss of his soulmate, only to spend decades fighting the elements. His voiceover sends chills down your spine as he mutters that the land doesn't care about your grief, it only cares about who is strong enough to hold it. We see a quick flash of a woman inside the house, the widowed partner we've been speculating about, moving quietly in the background, a silent pillar of support for a man who is clearly still haunted by the ghost of Alexandra. But the real emotional punch comes when we see a young man in his early 20s walking towards Spencer. This is John Dutton II. The resemblance is striking, and you can see the fire in his eyes, a fire that suggests he is ready to take on his father's mantle, even as the world calls him to a much darker duty. The tension in this opening scene is palpable, establishing right away that while the ranch has grown in size, the peace Spencer sought has remained permanently out of reach. We see shots of cattle being moved through the snow, the breath of the horses rising like ghosts in the air, and a sense of looming dread that suggests the quiet years for the Duttons are officially over. The cinematography captures that classic Sheridan grit, using shadows and light to show us a Spencer who was more of a protector than a hunter now, but a man who is clearly running out of time. The atmosphere of the trailer shifts violently from the quiet, frozen peaks of Montana to the deafening, blood-soaked chaos of the Atlantic Wall, signaling that the scale of 1944 will be global. We transition from the crackle of Spencer's fireplace to the thunderous roar of artillery as we get our first look at the Normandy landings. This isn't just a background detail, it is a central pillar of the story. We see John Dutton II, played by a fresh-faced but hardened actor, huddled in a landing craft, the spray of salt water mixing with the sweat on his brow. The camera stays tight on his face, capturing that raw Dutton determination, the same look we saw in Spencer during the Great War. This sequence is shot with a visceral, shaky cam realism that makes you feel every explosion. It's clear that Taylor Sheridan wants us to understand that the survival of the Yellowstone Ranch isn't just being fought for in the mountains, but on the beaches of France. If John doesn't make it back, the lineage we know and love in the modern era simply ceases to exist. The stakes have never been higher. But while John is fighting for his life overseas, a different kind of threat is arriving at the ranch's front gates. Back in Montana, a dust-covered car pulls up the long dirt road, and out steps a young man with a refined East Coast air about him. This is Elizabeth's son, the child born of Jack Dutton's legacy but raised in the shadows of Boston. He looks around at the vast expanse of the ranch with a mixture of awe and cold calculation. His arrival is framed with an intense, suspenseful score that tells us he isn't just here for a family reunion. He represents the Jamie Dutton energy of this era, the educated, distant relative who feels entitled to a piece of the empire he never bled for. We see a tense standoff on the porch where Spencer stares down this newcomer, and the silence between them is louder than any gunshot. The dialogue is sharp and biting. Elizabeth's son makes it clear that he knows his rights and he knows the law, while Spencer reminds him that on this ranch, the only law that matters is the one written in the dirt. This section of the trailer brilliantly sets up the dual conflict that will define the season, a physical war for survival in Europe and a psychological war for inheritance in Montana. We see quick flashes of Elizabeth's son looking through old ledgers and maps, his eyes filled with a dangerous ambition that suggests he might be willing to tear the family apart to get what he wants. Meanwhile, the footage cuts back to the chaos of the war, showing John Dutton II leading a squad through a bombed-out village, proving that he has the grit and leadership of a true cowboy, even in the middle of a world war. The contrast between the two cousins is established instantly. One is proving his worth through sacrifice, while the other is looking to claim power through paperwork. It creates an incredible sense of urgency and resentment that will surely boil over. The trailer also gives us a haunting shot of Elizabeth, herself, older now, and dressed in mourning black, looking out a window in Boston with a look of deep regret. It makes you wonder if she sent her son to Montana to reclaim his birthright, or if he is acting on his own dark impulses. Every frame of this section is packed with subtext, building a layer of suspense that makes your heart race. We see the ranch hands watching the newcomer with suspicion, their hands hovering near their holsters, signaling that the civilized world of the East Coast is about to collide head-on with the brutal reality of the West. This isn't just a story about a ranch anymore. It's a story about the fractured soul of a family divided by thousands of miles and decades of silence. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife, and by the time the music swells to a crescendo, you realize that the biggest threat to the Duttons might not be the war in Europe, but the blood that flows through their own veins. The cinematography here is breathtaking, moving from the muddy, gray trenches of France to the golden, sweeping vistas of the Yellowstone, reminding us exactly what is at stake. It's a masterful setup that leaves the audience desperate to know who will ultimately stand tall when the smoke clears. Just when you think the tension couldn't get any tighter, the trailer shifts its focus toward the broken rockland, proving that no Yellowstone story is complete with the powerful and often tragic perspective of the Native American people. The music transitions from the heavy drums of war to a haunting, soulful flute melody that feels like the very earth itself is speaking. We see a powerful image of Tiana Rainwater standing tall against a backdrop of the sprawling valley, her face showing the wisdom and the scars of a woman who has survived the horrors of the boarding school era and come out stronger on the other side. She isn't the victim we saw in 1923 anymore. She is a matriarch, a protector of her people's future. The trailer gives us a glimpse of her holding a young child, and the narration hints that this child is the key to the Rainwater bloodline that eventually leads us to Thomas. There is a deeply moving scene where Tiana and Spencer lock eyes across a property line, not as enemies, but as two survivors who recognize the same exhaustion in each other. It suggests a fascinating temporary alliance. They are both fighting to keep the world from swallowing their heritage whole. But as the medicine for our curiosity continues, the trailer introduces the true darkness of 1944. The atmosphere turns cold and predatory as we are introduced to the central antagonist, and if the rumors are true, this is where we see the absolute powerhouse presence of Matthew McConaughey. He appears as a sleek, sophisticated, but terrifyingly ruthless land developer who represents the encroaching hand of modern industry. He isn't a brawling thug, he is a man who uses the law and the chaos of the wartime economy as a weapon. He sees in a dimly lit office, his boots up on a desk, looking at a map of the Yellowstone with the hungry eyes of a wolf. His voice is a smooth southern drawl that masks a heart of pure stone, and he speaks about how the age of the cowboy is a relic that needs to be buried to make way for progress. The conflict he brings is different from anything Spencer has faced before. It's a war of signatures, bank foreclosures, and political backstabbing. To counter this intelligent villain, we see the introduction of the muscle. John Bernthal explodes onto the screen in a role that is clearly designed to be the spiritual predecessor to Rip Wheeler. He plays a man with a dark past who has found a home and a purpose at the Yellowstone. We see him in a brutal bar fight, moving with a feral intensity that reminds us why Bernthal is the master of these roles. He is Spencer's enforcer, the man who does the things the law won't allow, and his loyalty to the Dutton name is absolute. The chemistry between him and the aged Spencer is instant. They are two men out of time, clinging to a way of life that the rest of the world wants to forget. There's a high-octane sequence where Bernthal's character is chasing down saboteurs on horseback, the camera mounted low to the ground to capture the pounding hoofbeats and the spray of dirt. This section of the trailer is all about the action that we've been craving. We see the ranch under siege, not by a single army, but by the slow, creeping rot of corporate greed and the violent desperation of those who think Spencer is too old to fight back. But they are wrong. One of the most chilling shots shows Spencer loading an old rifle, his hands steady despite his age, as he tells Bernthal's character that he's already died once in Africa, and he's not afraid to do it again for this dirt. The trailer weaves these two threads together perfectly, the Rainwaters fighting to reclaim their dignity and the Duttons fighting to hold on to their soul. It feels like a powder keg waiting for a spark. We see the corporate villain laughing as he signs a document, contrasted with the Rainwaters performing a traditional ceremony and the Duttons branding cattle in the cold morning light. The juxtaposition is masterfully done, highlighting the three different worlds colliding in the same valley. The suspense builds as we see a nighttime raid on the ranch, with barns burning and shadows moving through the smoke. It's clear that 1944 won't just be a drama, it's going to be a full-scale Western thriller. The script emphasizes that this is the moment where the Duttons either solidify their empire or lose it forever. Every character introduced in this section feels essential, from the calculating developer to the fierce Tiana and the explosive enforcer. The visuals are saturated with deep oranges from the fires and cold blues from the Montana night, creating a look that is both beautiful and terrifying. You can feel the weight of history in every frame, and the realization that the peace Spencer fought so hard for is being dismantled by men who have never stepped foot in a stirrup. It's a call to arms for the audience, making us feel the same righteous anger that Spencer feels. By the end of this section, the trailer has successfully raised the stakes to an impossible level, leaving us wondering how a 50-year-old Spencer can possibly survive the combined weight of a world war, a family betrayal, and a corporate invasion. The energy is electric, and the promise of a McConaughey-Sklenar-Bernthal showdown is enough to make any Yellowstone fan lose their mind with excitement. As the trailer reaches its emotional peak, we dive into the deep, aching heart of the Dutton family, exploring the psychological toll that decades of survival have taken on Spencer and the people who inhabit his world. The pace slows down for a moment, moving away from the explosions and the corporate threats to focus on the intimate, sorrowful conversations that happen in the quiet corners of the ranch house. We see Spencer sitting at the heavy oak table in the dining room, the same table where so many Dutton tragedies have been discussed, and he is staring at an old, faded photograph of Alexandra. This is the medicine for the fans who are still mourning her loss, the confirmation that her spirit is the driving force behind everything Spencer does. His voiceover returns, softer this time, as he explains that he didn't build this empire for himself, but for the son she died to give him. But that son, John Dutton II, is thousands of miles away, and the trailer gives us a haunting montage of the letters they send back and forth. We see John in the muddy trenches of France, his hands shaking as he tries to write by the light of a single candle. And then we see Spencer on the porch, clutching those same letters like they are the only thing keeping him alive. The emotional weight is staggering. It highlights the cruel irony of the Dutton legacy. They fight so hard to keep the land for their children, but the world keeps taking those children away. This section also explores the complex dynamic between Spencer and the widowed woman living on the ranch. We see that theirs isn't a fairy tale romance, it's a bond forged in necessity and shared grief. There is a beautiful, understated scene where Spencer helps him clean a wound on his hand, and she tells him that he needs to stop fighting a war that ended 20 years ago.
The tension between them is subtle but powerful, showing that while she loves him, she is also terrified of the darkness that lives inside him. And then, the trailer pivots back to the looming threat of Elizabeth's son, whose presence at the ranch is becoming more poisonous by the day. We see him standing in the middle of a field, dressed in expensive clothes that don't belong in Montana, talking to a group of men in suits, possibly the associates of the villainous developer played by McConaughey. This is the ultimate betrayal. The script hints that the cousin conflict isn't just about the land, it's about a clash of ideologies. Elizabeth's son believes the ranch is an asset to be sold and liquidated, while Spencer views it as a sacred trust. There is a chilling moment where the two men face off in the barn, and Elizabeth's son dares to bring up Jack and Alexandra, telling Spencer that the dead don't care about cattle. The reaction is terrifying. He doesn't shout, but the look in his eyes is enough to make the air turn cold. It's a masterclass in suspense, making the audience realize that the greatest danger to the ranch isn't the war or the developers, but the rot starting from within the family tree. The trailer also gives us a glimpse into the life of Spencer's younger child, the baby born to his new partner. This child represents the second chance we discussed in our breakdown, a way for the audience to see a Dutton grow up without the shadow of tragedy immediately looming over them. We see Spencer holding the baby while looking out at the mountains, a rare moment of peace that feels incredibly fragile. It makes you realize that if Spencer loses this fight, he isn't just losing the land, he's losing the future he promised to everyone he's ever loved. The cinematography in this section is more intimate, with close-ups that capture every flicker of doubt and determination on the actors' faces. We see the toll that the 1944 era is taking on the ranch hands, men who are being drafted into the war, leaving the Yellowstone vulnerable and understaffed. It creates a sense of frantic desperation. Spencer and Bernthal's character are shown trying to do the work of 10 men, their faces covered in grease and sweat, as they try to keep the machinery of the ranch moving while the world around them falls apart. The score during these scenes is a low, vibrating cello that builds a sense of claustrophobia, making the vast open spaces of Montana feel like a trap. You can see a quick flash of a telegram being delivered to the ranch, the dreaded "We regret to inform you" notice, and for a split second, the screen goes black. The suspense is unbearable. Is it John? Is the lineage about to be cut short? When the image returns, we see Spencer standing in the graveyard where Kara and Jacob are buried, looking at the empty space next to them. It is a powerful reminder that in the world of Yellowstone, the cost of the land is always paid in blood. This section perfectly balances the epic scale of the series with the deeply personal stakes of its characters. It shows us that 1944 will be a story of endurance, exploring what happens to a man when he has nothing left to lose but everything to protect. The writing stays true to that tough-as-nails Dutton philosophy, while allowing for moments of profound vulnerability that will leave the audience's mouths open in shock and empathy. By the end of this section, the trailer has successfully turned the ranch into a character of its own, a beautiful, brutal monument to a family's stubborn refusal to die. The energy is heavy, the stakes are life and death, and the mystery of who will survive the year 1944 is more tantalizing than ever before. This isn't just a trailer, it's a promise of an emotional roller coaster that will define the legacy of the Yellowstone for generations to come. The trailer hurtles towards its final explosive crescendo, blending the screams of the battlefield with the thunder of hooves in a way that will leave you absolutely breathless. We see a rapid-fire montage of sheer chaos that defines 1944, starting with a massive explosion on the shores of France that transitions into the front gates of the Yellowstone being rammed open by dark, unmarked trucks. This is the war on two fronts coming to a head. We see John Dutton II rising from the sand in Normandy, his hands caked in grit, screaming for his men to move forward. While back in Montana, Spencer is seen strapping on his holster with a grim finality that tells us the time for talking is over. The music reaches a deafening operatic peak as we see the first real confrontation between Spencer and Matthew McConaughey's villainous character. They meet on a bridge at the edge of the property, the modern car of the developer idling next to Spencer's horse. McConaughey's character tells him that the world is moving on, and men like Spencer are just ghosts waiting for a grave. But Spencer's response is legendary. He simply tells him that he's been a ghost for 30 years, and he's not afraid to do it again for this dirt. This is the moment where the action hits a whole new level. We see the ranch hands and the Dutton family engaging in a high-stakes shootout against corporate mercenaries in the middle of a torrential rainstorm. The mud, the blood, and the muzzle flashes create a visceral, terrifying atmosphere that feels like a classic Western turned into a horror movie. We see John Bernthal's character absolutely unleashing hell, proving